Well, welcome back to the Simultaneous Podcast. Glad to be here with you. Sitting across the desk from me today is
John Nicholson. I mean, Josh Watford.
Yeah, a little.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, a little role reversal.
You're changing it up on me
to surprise us here to start things.
John's got the record button with him today,
that's exactly
right.
Right.
We're flipping it around.
I just took advantage of having control for once in my life.
Speaking of control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where we are.
We're talking about self-control or temperance.
Temperance. What a great... That's a word we need to resurrect. We just don't...
Yeah.
It's not a word that enters our vocabulary or our conversations very often at all.
Yeah. Now, many people understand to temper something is like with... like metal or something when you
funny conversation
metal.
And just part of it, just to seize on that for a moment. C.S. Lewis, we're going through Mere Christianity on Wednesday nights, and he talks about temperance,
right?
And I was there with the metallurgy and tempering of metals and those kinds of things, and I learned some other things that can be tempered. Chocolate can be tempered.
Yeah,
that was a whole new aha for me, you know, to get it to a certain consistency for candies and those kinds of things. And there's a tempering. And I think, was it eggs? I think eggs were the other thing that they mentioned, tempering an egg for baking purposes or those kinds of things. And I was blown away by all this kind of stuff. But it's, again, to get at the definition, which we'll kick to you in a moment, but it is getting it to the right spot.
Yeah.
Not too much, not too little, but the just right, the sweet spot, if you will, of all things. And so, but temperance is something we need to have in our own lives.
Yeah, it's one of those words that, it's like fortitude. That's what's usually used for wisdom in the cardinal virtues. And we mentioned this back at the intro, but we decided to use wisdom. We chose temperance instead of self-control.
Right.
Because even though, again, you're getting at the word temperance and what it means, it's a little bit different than what we typically mean when we say self-control. Self-control is just it's controlling yourself to make decisions that you'll regret later, even though you may want to make them right now.
Yeah.
But temperance is that it's, even though it's strongly related to self-control,
it's more than.
I typically use them interchangeably, but I do think the broader idea is more than just not making decisions now that you'll regret later.
Right.
It is that finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the understanding that there is joy there instead of just self-flagellation, right? There is joy in choosing Jesus over anything else.
Yeah.
And that's Jesus is the sweet spot. There you go. I need that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, we make t-shirts out of that. But yeah, it's such an interesting thing. And I really think, and I think this is the case with really just about all the virtues that we are talking through and working through, is that I know our tendency, I know a lot of our, particularly our type A kind of folks that are out there, high task driven, that kind of thing, we want the checklist. What do I do so I can get this and achieve whatever it is? But when we're in this realm of virtue, we're not so much checklisting. It's more of developing an art or a sensitivity to or an awareness of, and beginning to figure out how to incorporate these things into our lives. And that's a whole different animal than simply checking the box. Now, again, the discipline can help us to achieve that, but it's not just about doing the deed and having that done.
Yeah, I was thinking about our Temperance Day 1 scripture in the Virtue Journal, and I put Titus 2:11-12. For the grace of God has appeared, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions. God's grace trains us.
Right.
And that's such a beautiful picture, that it's not some, high demanding coach. If any of you have played sports and had one of those just ornery coaches that just wanted to yell at you and make you run for really no good reason other, my coaches would say, run until I'm tired.
Right.
And so I don't think God's grace is telling us to run until God is tired, right? Yeah. This is a leading into what is best for us that, is different than any earthly analogies we could possibly even come up with. So, so my definition of temperance that I brought up, we're recording this the week after the sermon. And so I put that temperance is the right ordering of our desires, emotions, and actions toward God. And I think it begins at the desire stage.
Yeah, and that's Augustine. Yeah, he says it's all about disordered loves and getting those loves ordered.
Yep.
And so this is a key part of this. I think with temperance.
Yeah, and so when our desires, when we desire something, it is even food, right? Yeah. Food is a good thing to desire. We're recording this right after lunch. I'm glad I had some fried catfish from the shack.
Right.
I crave that some days. It's just such a good meal. And so it's a right desire. God created our bodies to use food to fuel everything that we do. So desiring food isn't a problem, but when the desire for food has become disordered in such a way that we could never even imagine desiring Jesus more than we do food, then that becomes a problem.
Right.
And it's the same with other categories that I brought up on Sunday, whether it's our material possessions, whether it's our little gadgets that we want and make our own image the way we want it to look like, whether it's sex or clothing or anything.
Yeah, the list is long.
Yeah, just our pedigrees, our the way people perceive us, all that stuff. When those things become idols, that's when the problem comes in.
Right.
And what we're focusing on this week with temperance is allowing the Spirit to convict us of these things and being very intentional about being aware of our desires and our emotions and our actions so that we're not spending triple the time that we should on our phones.
Right.
But trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the desire that's driving that action, and then tempering that desire so that we don't even want to do that anymore.
Yeah, but there are some things we should want to do. We were just having a conversation before we hit record about how busy and how intensive our summer has been.
Right.
And those are good things. And it's been important for us to do the things that we've been about, but it does take a toll. Mm-hmm. And could we continue to press and continue to do and continue to pursue? And yeah, we could, and wear ourselves out with those kinds of things. Or do we approach even this issue of obedience to the gospel, obedience to the Great Commission in a temperate way, understanding that God, yes, has called us, but it is not dependent upon us. It's dependent upon Him. And so our task is living our entire lives, whether it is in pursuing gospel matters or if it's pursuing how I eat fried catfish at the shack on a regular basis. All of those things in a way that reflect and rightly image the presence and marks of God upon my life. And this is one of those virtues that certainly is a hinge, because it has to do with our relationship with God. We have to have that vertical relationship in place in order to even begin to put our hands, I think, around
absolutely
what should we be exercising temperance over.
Yeah.
But then that has direct implications in our relationships with our fellow man, family, friends, strangers on the street, whoever. All of these things have impacts there.
And that goes to that Philippians 2 passage that I brought up with Jesus.
That's right.
The whole point that Paul is making there is humility. And his example, if you will, is Jesus, and how he, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by becoming form of a servant, and then obeyed even to the point of death, and death on a cross. And so when I look at that, I see that as the ultimate example of temperance, that Jesus was God,
right,
on his heavenly throne, but then stepped down.
Set it aside.
He set that aside for our sake, for love, and for the glory of God. And so what are things that we need to do that with? Even though we have the freedom, Jesus did not have to come and save us.
Right.
I mean, there's been philosophical and theological debates over all that. However, I believe God had the freedom to not save us. And Jesus, the Son of God, did have the freedom to not come, be born in the form of man, and die the death that he did. He didn't have to do that, but he chose that.
Yeah, because he loved us.
Because of love.
Right.
And so, because of our love for God, what type of temperance do we need in our lives that leads to thinking of others as much as we think about ourselves? I mean, because again, that's Paul's point. That's what led to that part in Philippians 2. Was
Right.
Have this mind among yourselves, because you have it in Christ. This is the mind of Christ.
But then he doesn't give us a whole list of specifics.
Nope, he doesn't.
This gets messy, Josh. I mean, give me a list of, and you did. You came up with some categories that you talked through.
Right. But I didn't tell you how to go about.
Not only did you not tell us how, but it wasn't exhaustive. I mean, because there are other categories that
absolutely
I've already had conversations with some folks this week as they are wrestling with, how can I be temperate? You and I were having some conversation about that. What does this look like in this, when we really get down to the brass tacks of this, or down in the dirt, as I like to talk about it? For those of us who like the nice, neat, clean checklist, this isn't available for us here.
No, it's not. And you know what it takes?
I'm all ears.
It takes wisdom.
I had an idea. Partnered with our faith, our hope in God, all of these. This is one of those places that we begin to see. It's almost as if we're to use the baking analogy, we've got to put all the ingredients in the cake to get the proper cake out. Mm-hmm. And this is another one of those essential ingredients for us to learn how to live life fully and well in the image of God.
Right. And we've said multiple times, and I think I said even on Sunday, that these 10 virtues that we're going through,
they're not exhaustive.
It's not an exhaustive list either.
Yeah.
And there are multiple ways to categorize different virtues, with humility probably being a big one that is a huge virtue. And
one that we're not talking about that would, I think, have implications for our cultural context is chastity. I mean, that's just a virtue that's lost in our day and age.
Absolutely. So we could have extended this sermon series probably through the rest of the year.
Yeah, but it was a summer sermon series. So.
Exactly. So I mean, we had to come up with 10, and here are 10
here
for you. So we're doing the best we can. But and another thing about temperance that I was struck when I was doing my biblical study in it was how often self-control or temperance was linked to Jesus coming back. One of my favorite ones was there in Titus, but I did not read the 1 Peter passage.
Right.
And so I did want to bring that one up right quick. And he says, "Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." That sober-minded is self-control, temperance idea. But I mean, he continues to talk about all of that. So he was foreknown before the foundation of the world, was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you, who are through him who are believers in God, who raised him from the dead, gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. So all these things are centered around this hope that we have, the faith that we have in what Jesus has done for us, and the hope in what he will do for us. And, that's not the only one. That 2 Timothy passage is really good. And there's just multiple times throughout Scripture.
It's an interesting thing to watch.
Even in the book of Revelation, it comes up multiple times.
Right.
And it's just particularly the connection between hope and temperance is an interesting connection.
And again, because that's that verticality in our relationship that as we begin to get that more right, more intentional, it does have this influence and impact in how I'm living my life and my day-to-day here.
Yeah.
Even my moment by moment, the decisions I'm making, the relationships I'm engaging with, and how I'm doing that. All of those things are affected and impacted by, like I say, this hope. What is that faith? What is it that I believe? Those things make a big difference in how we pursue these things, I think.
Yeah, and I keep going back to, so let me just say this. Temperance, of all the virtues, I think could turn into self-righteousness the most easily. Justice is probably there.
Right.
Yeah, justice is probably right there with it, but I would put temperance right there on top of the ones that could most easily turn into self-righteousness. And I think we have to remember, that's why my main point was that temperance is gospel-shaped.
Yeah.
Period. Right? That's it. When we're living out a temperate life, we're going to be walking in the Spirit, not in the flesh.
Right.
And I think when Paul tells us that multiple times throughout Romans and Galatians, and then elsewhere as well, when he says walk in the Spirit, that is not a moment of self-righteousness whenever you do that.
Right.
There is no way you can stand before a holy God and say, look at what I did. Because you're walking in the Spirit. And we have to allow the Spirit to convict us of these things. And that's what I was trying to do. I was intentionally vague in a lot of the how-tos.
Right.
I just wanted to put some scriptures before us and then some categories in which to think about these things in to get a little bit more specific. But yeah, I intentionally didn't do, okay, well, if you eat more than 2 hot dogs at a meal, then you're being gluttonous and you're an idolater
and
of food.
Cardiologist is going to have a conversation.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other thing. But, it is really hard when you start getting into those real specific things. Yeah. And, I just think the Spirit can work at us in different ways, and we can all still be faithful in that.
Absolutely. And I think it does. And this is part of the messiness of this.
Yeah.
I think it was Leonard Sweet who made the statement in one of the books I read by him that what may singe one soul may make another soul sing. Mm. And so what I may need to be exercising is temperance in my life. And I think this is where our legalism can creep in.
Right.
Our self-righteousness is, I'm doing this and it is making a difference in my life. You need to do it too. Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
There are some things, and yes, there are some broad spaces, categories, if you will. Of here's some boundary lines that we need to look at.
Yeah.
But how we apply that specifically can be very different, vastly different from person to person.
Right. And I said explicitly in my sermon that, for some people, 4 hours a day on a phone may be temperate.
Right. But none of us heard that because all we heard was that you want us to start fasting more regularly.
Yeah, I know. That's where most of my conversations with people have focused around. You're talking about not eating food?
That's right.
Well, yes and no. I
drive by a donut shop, right?
I would strongly encourage anybody who has never fasted or hasn't fasted in a long time from food,
and if
they are medically able. I understand their extenuating circumstances. However, I do believe that the clear example for us in Scripture is to be regularly doing that in some way.
Yes, and I will agree with that, and it's an area in my life that you have been a convicting presence in my life over that. But again, I think this is where it does lend itself towards self-righteousness and legalism. Yes. That if you're checking these boxes, then you're in the good, and it may not be. Yeah. There may be somebody that is doing all the things, but inwardly they're still, if you will, using Jesus' terms, still full of dead men's bones.
Yeah. Whitewashed tombs.
Exactly. And the whole point of this is for us to more freely, and this is grace training us, making us more able to image the very presence of God to this world more naturally, just in the things that we're doing, really without us thinking. It's spiritual muscle memory in a way, if you will.
Absolutely. And again, going back to C.S. Lewis's discussion in the virtues, that it's less about us trying to just do more actions,
right? But
it's more about becoming the type of person that those actions are natural.
Yes, and that they have eternal consequence. That's one of the great things I think that Lewis's Mere Christianity brings up time and again, is that all of these things that we're talking about, these virtues, they are, and our choice is about them. Let me make that clear. Our choice is about exhibiting temperance or not. They are shaping us. Those choices have eternal consequence.
Absolutely.
And that's a sobering thought.
There you go.
To bring that back around.
Yeah. I don't know what time we got left,
We're
John.
Good. What else you got, though?
No, I just kind of going back to that with C.S. Lewis when he's talking about when he's talking about the difference between just doing the actions and then becoming the type of person. He uses the example or illustration of a tennis player.
Yeah.
And, a terrible tennis player can make a good hit every now and then.
Right.
Or a tennis player could make an accurate hit out of anger, but that doesn't make him a good tennis player.
Exactly.
A good tennis player is one that has practiced but has become just knows those things intuitively and is able to make that shot no matter what.
Right.
And again, he's not calling for perfection, because even the best of tennis players, I can't even call one off the top of my head. I think there's one that's like a weird Russian name.
Yeah.
But even they make mistakes.
Yes.
And so those illustrations break down at some point. But I thought that was a very good illustration that, even a novice of a tennis player can, on accident, make a good shot.
Right.
And what we want to become are people who have practiced these things so well that we have that spiritual muscle memory that when I'm trying to temper my emotions, I'm not having to sit there and intentionally think about all these things that I just preached on this past Sunday in order to motivate me to make the right decision.
Right.
I'm having to do that this week. Right? I'm having to do that this week because I'm not a professional at temperance just yet. And may or may not ever be. I don't know. But I do know that the Lord is molding me and shaping me into more of His image. And He's doing that by His Word. And hopefully at some point in my life, this will be more of a natural occurrence rather than something I'm intentionally thinking about on a daily basis. So that's my prayer for myself and for you and for everybody else, that God would mold us into His image so that we can more accurately reflect Him.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I always think, because I know in my own life, I had this idea as a young believer that if I could just overcome some certain great sins, I would have it made. But now as a much older believer, I may have kind of overcome, drug, sex, and rock and roll kind of things. But now it's not those things. It's those sins that do beset me, my pride or my, whatever else it is that is still there. I realize how far I am from the goal. I always think of Paul, y'all have heard me talk about that before, the chronology. If you read his letters in chronology, he starts, Apostle of Christ, and, to the Gentiles and all this and all those credentials. But his last letter to Timothy, Paul, chief of sinners. The closer we get, the further we realize that we really are. And so this journey is a lifelong journey. It's not this sprint. It is a marathon, lifelong pursuit of being more like Christ.
Temperance is not a week-long program.
It sure would be nice if it was.
Man, it'd be great. If I could just spend a week on each of the categories that I brought up and then just have everything under control for the rest of my life, man, that'd be great. But that's just not how God made us.
Well, man, thanks for helping us begin to wrap our heads around this and to engage with it. Like I say, just from conversations I've had with other folks in our church family, it has struck a chord. It's been close to the mark, and that's a good thing. And we're grateful for you, and may we all pursue a little more temperance.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace training in our lives.
It's a great, beautiful picture. Grace training.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time.
Next time.